Hello and welcome back to Whiskey Wars. Tonight we are going to be reviewing Bulleit Frontier Whiskey. This is a whiskey that many people are familiar with, so let's get into it. So where does the Bulleit name come from and why is it spelled wrong? Well, it comes from a man named Augustus Bulleit, and that's how he spelled his last name. Now this man was an innkeeper in the 1830s, and eventually he got into distilling whiskey. Now his original blend was a very high rye whiskey. It actually should have been qualified as a rye, but at the time there was no laws to govern what you called something. So it was just considered a whiskey. And now the new version is still a high rye mash bill, but not nearly as high as it used to be because now there are laws, and so you cannot go above 50% rye if you want to call it a bourbon. So this one is only 28% rye, which is still a lot of rye for a standard bourbon. However, this version of the whiskey didn't appear until 1999. Now, this has always been a sourced whiskey. It was originally sourced from Buffalo Trace, then it was sourced from Four Roses, and now it's sourced from Four Roses and some unknown places, which we'll probably never know because that's kind of how sourcing works these days, unfortunately. But it claims to be, right here on the bottle, it says Frontier Whiskey. So what about it exactly is Frontier Whiskey? Well, really nothing except for the backstory, because it's just a sourced whiskey. So I guess just really good marketing? I don't know. To be fair, it is a cool looking bottle, and really no bottle, in my opinion, says whiskey more than the Bulleit bottle. With all that said, let's see if what's inside is as good as the marketing. All right, we got our glass. Let's get some poured and get into it. Pretty standard bourbon color, nice amber color. Let's go ahead and give it a smell and see what we can get on the nose of this whiskey. So I get very strong cherry, citrus, I'd say definitely like an orange, maybe some apple, like a green apple. Yeah, the citrusy notes are really kind of overpowering your standard bourbon notes. Let's see what else we can get here. There is some caramel in there, but it's definitely buried under the other citrusy notes. Some brown sugar. And there is some oak in there. I'd say it's a sour oak, but that could be the other notes just kind of covering up that. And definitely some pepperiness. I'd say kind of a black pepper smell. And hints of cinnamon. And kind of a vanilla, just general kind of a heavy cream kind of smell. All in all, a very nice nose. Now let's see if that translates to the palate. So those citrusy notes are definitely showing up on the palate. I would say it's definitely like an orange on the palate. Maybe hints of apple in there as well, and then just a slight cherry. And of course you're getting your standard bourbon notes like caramel, maybe a little brown sugar, but it's very light. And then there's a lot of cinnamon, especially on the back of the palate. You're getting quite a bit of cinnamon, and as it goes into the finish, even more cinnamon and quite a bit of that black pepper we smelled on the nose. Quite a bit of burn on the finish. I wouldn't say it's overpowering or off-putting, but there is a lot of burn on the back end. Let's give this one more taste here. Yeah, nothing really new there, but there is quite a bit of alcohol burn, and I was just looking at the bottle, and it is only 90 proof. To me, there's more burn there than a 90 proofer typically. I wouldn't say it's nearly as bad as some of the other ones that I've reviewed that way that I thought had too much burn, but it is kind of proofier tasting than some other 90 proofers I've had. Let's give it one last sip here, finish this glass off, and see if we can get anything else out of that. All right, so on that taste, I got quite a bit of the apple, kind of a caramel apple like you get at the fair. On just the very front of the palate, on the tip of your tongue, you kind of get that taste. And then as it goes into the finish, then I kind of got a cinnamon cherry. And then it goes into the more cinnamon and more black pepper as it gets into the finish. And that's kind of what's lingering on the finish, is just kind of a cinnamon, maybe peppery kind of burn, but there is some sweetness in there. I'd say it's some caramel in there in the finish as well. All in all, not a bad bourbon. I think for the price, I think this is around the $22 mark. I'd say it's up there with some of the better ones. I wouldn't say this is the best $22 bottle, but it's definitely worth a try if you've never had it. And I would say this would make a decent daily drinker or weekly drinker. However often it is that you decide to drink whiskey, this is not a bad option, especially at the price that it's at. So that's my final thoughts on this. I think I'd give this one something like a 7 out of 10 as far as a ranking goes in that budget range. And again, if you've never had it, it's definitely worth a buy just to give it a try. And as always, folks, I have to say, you can never have too much good whiskey.